I'd like everybody to have the freedom to share their opinions, the freedom to associate, and the freedom to express themselves. I think that's a basic human right. And I get really pissed off when small groups of people, often unelected, use their enormous platforms to basically deplatform people that disagree with their particular political philosophy.
Cardano, which trades for 36 cents and has lost 9.2% in the last week, is currently the 7th largest currency, directly below XRP. The founder of Cardano, Charles Hoskinson, responded to an open letter written to him by humanely defending Cardano and elucidating any misunderstandings about what the coin stands for. In an open letter, Hoskinson was accused of siding with dangerous right-wing ideas and vocabulary that he liked to associate with Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk. Yet, the only position Charles supported was that of open dialogue and constructive disagreement. Charles denied taking any political positions. The general public is being brainwashed, in Charles's opinion, by the mainstream media, in an effort to foster division and discourage open discussion. One of the most common examples of this was during the pandemic, when anyone who questioned the causes of the illness or the best way to treat it was utterly cancelled. Yet looking back, it's clear that the queries weren't absurd. That's the beauty of hindsight. In the open letter, Hoskinson was criticized for not using Bitcoin's anonymity and for using Cardano's protocols to pander to the alt-right. Hoskinson asserted that the decisions made by Cardano are not those of his own, but rather those of the community, in an effort to vindicate both himself and Cardano. Let us listen as to what Charles will say.
When I read that open letter, I can tell this person is the victim of profound programming and propaganda. You see, the media and modern society, what it does to you is it puts you in a chair, almost like Clockwork Orange, and it just brainwashes and programs and programs and programs and programs to turn you into a machine that is subservient to an ideology. This is not exclusive to the left. It certainly can be done on the right, and it certainly can be done anywhere in between. And it's done for a very purposeful reason, to have you give your power, agency, and independence and creativity to someone else. So one of the first things you have to do is build systems that don't permit propagandized, programmed people from interfacing and spreading that. Instead, you build systems that force people to break out of that model and steel-man arguments, use the scientific method, use facts, force inclusive accountability, force philosophical debates, and don't reward those who speak the loudest or bark the loudest or threaten the loudest, but reward people who follow process. We tried to inculcate that in the Cardano ecosystem through the academic process, the peer review system. Every paper we wrote, it wasn't good enough to write it and say, look at the PhDs who stand behind it and how smart and charismatic and handsome and brilliant they are. We said at the end of the day, they are no better than the least amongst us until their papers pass a process. Doesn't mean they're right, but at least it means that they're subservient to a process, and no amount of ego can get them through it. That thought process has to work its way into governance. And when we have SIP 1694, if we get there, the MBO, Constitution, these things, if we design them correctly and we put the right institutions in place, it means that things don't get passed unless they've been thoroughly discussed in a very fact-based, objective reality. And we can chip away at that. Otherwise, what will happen is that Cardano will become a reflection of modern politics, a demagoguery abomination, a demagogic abomination that seeks only to endow power to the few at the expense of many. I didn't put my life's work to watch that happen. And I don't think the anarchy of Bitcoin is the solution of that. At the end of the day, Bitcoin accomplishes very few things by design, and it can never go beyond those things because it's afraid the minute it tries to step out of that pond, it'll not be able to sustain itself. And there's some truth to that. Like, for example, threatening to dial back the expressiveness. How many of you have thought about the expressiveness of Cardano outside of some of the engineers on it? For example, Sebastian very rightfully pointed out that the original white paper I wrote actually was quite bleak on the expressiveness of layer 1 and wanted to have a very simple scripting language that was Turing incomplete. We only discovered through innovation and research that we could have the properties of a simple language, but much more expressiveness. But the problem is that this scope increase changed the philosophy of Plutus in the layer 1 to the extent where everybody wants a feature. And the problem is not everybody's going to win. And Sebastian's point was that perhaps we should push for the layer 2. It's a fair point. And maybe we are already too expressive. The point is that if you don't like contingent staking, the problem is it's actually already here because of Plutus. The difference is it done as a layer 2 protocol or is it done as a layer 1 protocol? So if you don't like it, the only way to get rid of it is to dial Plutus back. That's not my opinion. That's just the reality that the language has in its current instantiation and form. And maybe you're not aware of that. And that's the point of a fact-based conversation, is to explore these types of things and the design decisions that are made. And as you become more in charge, you're now the custodians of that, for better or for worse. Just like the authors of the Constitution had to turn that over to the next generation, and they to the next generation, and they to the next generation, hoping that the original intent would in some way shine through, and the concepts and principles that endowed that government would shine through as well. Sometimes it did, oftentimes it didn't, which led to conflict and chaos. In the case of the United States, a civil war. So there's nothing perfect about it, and I hope that people take the time to really think through what I'm saying here. I've spent my life trying to figure out how to keep everybody happy, but the reality is I can't. And one thing I clearly do agree with in that open letter is the anonymity of Satoshi. He did it right. And I so thoroughly wish every single day that Cardano could have a very similar story to it. And it would be better off for that. Unfortunately, you only get to do that once. And the other thing is that sometimes it does require the courage to step out, because the reality is governments are led by people, not anonymous people. And if your only intent is to set up a system that does one thing, you can be Satoshi, and you can do that quite well. But if your intent is to build something that generation after generation is going to take custodianship and stewardship of, it's a living, breathing organism that's going to change. Even if the founder stays anonymous, the problem is that all you've done is create a deity, and that you're still at the mercy of the frailties of the humans that lead the system today. America is only as good as the leaders it has today, not the hallowed icons of the past who signed the Constitution. And as good as they were, they're useless to us now. And so we have to have a system that works for us now. And when we don't, that's why you get what you get. Similarly, Cardano is only as good as the people who lead it. So if the founder was anonymous, it would serve no benefit 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, as the changing of the guard happens. And you rely upon that leadership to work well. It's systems, code, checks and balances, customs, precedents, and processes that get us through it. And those have to be resilient against demagoguery, propaganda, and people who come in with very specific agendas, one way or the other.
What are your thoughts on Charles's ideas in this case? In answer to the open letter, do you agree with this response? If the information was helpful to you, please click the like button to support our modest channel. For now, gentlemen, that's all. Please come back for the next one. Thank you for watching.